today's young people, by the time they're 50 years old, a quarter of them will have lived single.
Yes. Remember that one is a whole number. I'm now 71. I've always been single. I always will be. I'm single at heart.
Welcome,
Bella DePaulo,
social scientist,
leading expert on single life,
and author of Single at Heart.
I started collecting all these examples in which I felt like I was being treated as lesser than because I was single.
What are some of the things that you would have missed out on doing if you believe you were partnered?
You know, I would miss out on every single day waking up so happy.
For people who are listening to this, whom feel like they self-sabotage relationships, what checklist would you offer them to say, hey, maybe it's not that you're sabotaging good things, but you're actually trying to preserve the really good things?
Right. And I'm a hugger.
You're very strong.
I love hugging.
And again, hands are very soft.
Oh, right.
All right, so I think I know what we're going to talk about.
Okay.
What's unique about this podcast is rather than doing multiple topics, we just like to focus on one.
Great.
Which I think makes us very compatible.
You believe it's magic.
We single at heart people love being single. We're happy and flourishing because we're single, not in spite of it.
Did you realize you were single at heart while being single, or were you partnered and that's when you were like, this doesn't feel right?
I've been single my whole life. And
what does that really mean though, Bella?
Okay.
You're so fine.
Yeah.
So you never had a boyfriend when you were young?
I did have several boyfriends when I was very young, and I don't have any horror stories. They were totally fine people. But when those relationships ended, I was just so happy to go back to my one true love, my single life.
This episode, we are welcoming social psychologist Dr. Bella DePaulo, the originator of the term single at heart. As soon as I heard of Dr. DePaulo's work, one name came to mind, Eartha Kitt. Eartha chose to live life on her own terms, creatively and romantically. And while she had many admirers up until she passed in 2008, she never remarried after her 1965 divorce and often emphasized the importance of independence and self-love over traditional romantic fulfillment. Now, I know a lot of people who resonate deeply with this famous clip.
What is compromising? Compromising for what? Compromising for what reason? To compromise for what?
But not too many who identify as single at heart. And I'm wondering if after this episode, that might change for some of you.
Bella, thank you so much for coming through. I'm so grateful to have you. You have a very fascinating story and a very fascinating book.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Single at Heart.
Yes.
You didn't bring me a signed copy.
So sorry.
All right, I'm feeling a little bit salty about it, but it's okay because you brought your presence and your warm smile. You told me a really great story on the phone that I would love for you to share.
Yeah. So one year, it was 1992, near the holidays, the Christmas holidays, I read this column, this advice column in the local paper, and it was from a woman who was recently widowed, and she said she was so sad about the holidays and she didn't know how she was going to make it through. And the advice columnist wrote a long response, and I underlined one sentence. She said, remember that one is a whole number. I'm now 71. I've always been single. I always will be. I'm single at heart, which means I love being single. So what interested me was the idea that a single person would need to be reassured that one is a whole number. And I also was noticing ways that I thought I was being treated differently because I was single. So, for example, I was teaching at a university, the University of Virginia, and during the week, my colleagues and I would go to lunch, but then on the weekends, the couples would socialize with each other, and I wasn't invited. The person who organized the class schedule asked me to come in and teach at night and she said that it would be too hard for the married faculty to come in at night. And that was before any of them even had kids. And so I started collecting all these examples in which I felt like I was being treated as lesser than because I was single. So that was my first book, Singled Out: How Singles Are Stereotyped, Stigmatized, and Ignored, and Still Live Happily Ever After. And from then on, I've been blogging. I've written the Living Single blog at Psychology Today since 2008, and I give talks and I write for other publications, and leading up to most recently my Single at Heart book, Single at Heart: The Power, Freedom, and Heart-Filling Joy of Single Life.
It's the smile in your voice, in your eyes, and of course on your face that feels refreshing to me, and also novel.
Oh, okay.
Because, of course, I know people who are single. I have people in my family who I've just only known to be single.
Right.
But there's never the joy or the conversation that says that this is my happily ever after.
Yes.
So it's always like this unspoken thing, and it feels like an unfinished book. So today's young people, by the time they're 50 years old, a quarter of them will have lived single.
Yes.
So do you think that we're going to see a rise in people now joyfully claiming to be single at heart?
Yes. And that's a really important thing, because the stereotypes are so pervasive. The expectations that if you're single, you can't really be happy. And I know this from experience and from the other people who are single at heart who have told me their stories. They'll say, well, if I say I love being single, I don't want to change that, other people will say, oh, you're just fooling yourself, or you haven't met the right person, or, well, you're young, wait till you get older. Well, I'm 71, so, I'm not going to change my mind. That's almost seen as freakish. Who would ever want to be single and want to stay single? And I remember one person told me the story that she was having lunch with a colleague, and the colleague said, well, don't you want to marry? And she said, no, I really don't. And the colleague said, well, don't you at least want to have a long-term, committed romantic relationship? And she told me that she felt like she had to say yes. Even though she didn't want that, she felt like her colleague could never understand that someone could love single life and want to stay single for positive reasons, for the freedom, the solitude, the people in your life, and not because what some people assume, you're running away from something, you had terrible experiences, your parents divorced, or whatever kind of thing they can come up with that makes it sound like a bad thing. And for me, and for the people who told me their stories for the Single at Heart book, it's a wonderful thing to get to be the person you really are.
Mm-hmm. I talk about sex and relationships for a living, and I'm very passionate about a well-lived, intimate life. Mm-hmm. So it might seem strange that here I am championing, consciously choosing, joyfully choosing single. But I would define your life and those who identify as single as heart as having a well-lived, intimate life.
Yes.
There was a stat that I loved that said that single at heart people have a better sex life than people who are in relationships that they're not joyfully in, and almost equal sexual satisfaction to those who are happily coupled.
Yes.
So do you have a bomb-ass sex life?
I am totally fine. I'll just leave it at that. And I think that people often don't ask when they do these big surveys of sex. Is like, they'll ask, how often do you have sex and so forth. But they don't ask, how often do you want to have sex? Or are you satisfied with the amount or the kind of sex that you get? If you don't want to have sex with someone or your partner, or you're tired of them or whatever, it's no triumph to be having sex if you'd rather be on your couch watching Netflix. Mm-hmm. And so I think this, I think we need to think about it, not in terms of, how much are you getting, but are you getting the kind and amount of sex that you want, which for some people is non-asexuals, right? At the time that you want. When people think,
But you can also have sexual partners and still be single at heart.
Oh, of course.
And of course, you can have a robust self-sexualize.
Yes, of course. Yeah, and I think when people think, oh, those poor single people, they're not getting any, I think what they have in mind when they're thinking about the couple person is what I call the magical, mythical, romantic partner. That's the partner who always wants the same amount and kind of sex you do at the same time that you do, in the same way that you do. It's someone who never strays and never wishes they could be with someone else. And, there probably are some people like that exist, but...
Well, you're describing the relationship that we ideally have with ourselves.
Yes.
Probably more accurately.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. What I think is so fascinating about this, because you just touched on this about asexuality, is that some single at heart people are asexual or aromantic, but not all.
Yeah, right. So in the survey, I have this online survey that's also in the book now. It's called Are You Single at Heart? And in the survey, I asked about being asexual. And among the people who were clearly not single at heart, 3% said they were. Among the people who were single at heart, 12% said they were, which is a fairly high number for being asexual. But that still means 78% weren't. You can be single at heart and aromantic or not aromantic, asexual or not asexual, every combination.
So to put it in plain language, you can be single at heart and still be very sexually attracted to people.
Sure.
You can have a very high sex drive.
Yes, and you can have a sex life.
And you can have a sex life,
right.
and you can enjoy the idea of companionship,
right,
but still choose not to have a long-term partner.
Right, so you don't put a romantic partner at the center of your life and organize your life around it. Now, here's something I had to be persuaded of when I was doing my research on this. I interviewed some people who are in long-term committed couples, and they insisted to me that they are single at heart. And here's what all of them had in common. They all had an unconventional relationship. So some of them actually lived apart, living apart together. They have their own place, but they're very much still a couple. And even if they didn't have their own places, they often had their own sections of the place that they lived in. They were also much more independent in their relationships, so they could each have time with friends or family without their partner thinking that time belongs to me. And it is a great strength to love the time you have to yourself. That means that you're very unlikely to be lonely. And so the exact thing that people pin on single people, oh, you're going to be lonely. If you're single at heart,
you're like, yes, I want to be alone.
I want to be alone. Yeah.
Seems like porn to me.
Yeah. And that also explains something else that people have a hard time believing, which is that in later life, it is often the people who have stayed single a long time, maybe their whole life, who are often doing really well. And part of the reason is they know how to they know how to be single. They probably like the time they have to themselves, so they're not going to be the caricature of the lonely, isolated single person. And also, there's something that I think is an advantage for married people who live together while they're married, which is that they get to split up the task. Although it's rarely a fair split of tasks, and I won't say who usually does the most. But what happens later is that if you are divorced or you become widowed, then suddenly you either don't know how to do all the things your spouse had taken over, or you're out of practice. And that can be really hard at exactly the time when you're grieving the loss of a marriage or a spouse. And the people who have been single all along, it's like, we've been there, we've done that, we know how to do everything.
Well, I'm looking at these soft hands. I'm like, where's the calluses that show me that you've been tiling and grouting?
Yeah, right. Well, okay, so you either learn how to do it yourself or you learn how to find people to do it, either to hire to help, swap with friends or Yeah.
Well, on the gender note, what I actually think is fascinating about single at heart is a lot of times when we think about intimate concepts, there is a heaviness on the stigmatization.
Yes.
One gender gets the heavy stigma and the other is scot-free, right?
Yeah.
The slut and the stud, for example. But when it comes to single at heart, it's almost like equal opportunity stigma. You're either like the cat lady and the spinster who like can't find anybody who's, you know, in many ways, women have a pressure to succeed through their relationships. And that's seen as the ultimate achievement. But for men who are single at heart, they get labeled as incels. They get labeled as creeps. They get labeled as like the crazy uncle. And so, especially in the time that we're in now, where there are a lot of single men, and there's a lot of single men online, and there's a lot of stigma associated with those men. What can you say to men who are single at heart?
Pardon the interruption, but I had to tell you about the incredible sponsor of this episode, me. I mean, why not, right? It is my podcast. And on that note, did you know that Lovers is so much more than a podcast? It's a deluxe suite of services designed to help you reach your intimate potential. Now, there's tons of free tools, for example, SHAI. Yup, I trained in AI on the past 20 years of my work, so if you have a quick question and want to know how I've answered this in the past, go to the homepage. Then there's the newsletter, weekly letters for my lovers you can sign up for, and last but not least, there's my resource library of free quizzes and worksheets. Now, if you like these but want more, come a little closer. Introducing the premium paid experience inside the Lovers community. Connect with like minds, book one-on-one time with me, join one of my weekly classes, and of course, be a part of the podcast. The Lovers community is $20 a month for members and free for muses because yes, I created a free preview space so you can learn more before committing. Now, I know I threw a lot at you just now, so let's keep it simple. All you have to know is go to loversbyshan.com to get everything you need and nothing more. Again, that's loversbyshan.com.
What can you say to men who are single at heart?
Oh my gosh, embrace your single life, invest in it, be proud of being single, because the single at heart are, you know, they're not going to be the incels who are.
But I think this is the thing. Sometimes you don't know what your reality is versus what reality you're told. So I don't think anybody calls themselves an incel. I think people just assume, oh, you're not partnered or you've been single for a long time. You are an incel.
Yes, and that is so wrong. Men who are single at heart, you know, love their single lives. They appreciate their friends. They appreciate their solitude. And you know, people who are single at heart, both men and women, have open-hearted understandings of intimacy and of love. So intimacy for us is not just sexual intimacy. Emotional intimacy matters too. And love for us is not just romantic love. We might have love for our friends, our cherished relatives, our students, if we're teachers, our athletes, if we're coaches, our spiritual figures, our ancestors, our pets. So it's a much more open-ended, open-hearted approach towards intimacy, love, family.
I'm curious about a scenario that I know of, if you would determine that this person is single at heart. But I have a friend, she is married, they have 2 kids, they have a very big community. Like they just do a lot in the community, and they have a lot, they always have friends over, etc. They have one friend in particular who is just there all the time. And she has her own place, her own house. She lives quite far, but if they go on vacation, she comes. For a lot of the times they have like kid stuff, she's helping to plan it. So she's like intimately involved in the relationship, yet she doesn't have her own separate romantic relationship, and she has her own place. Could she possibly be single at heart?
Possibly. In fact, there's someone in my study and the people that I interviewed for my Single at Heart book who sounds very much like that. I think that is something we're seeing more of, where finally people are starting to take friendship more seriously.
And you say the single at heart, I don't know if this is a stat or an opinion, are better friends.
They are, single people more generally are more likely to stay in touch with their friends and exchange help with them and be there for them emotionally and practically. And what's interesting about that is, in contrast to what happens when people get married. So there's a study that followed people from when they were single to when they got married and after that, and found that when people got married, they basically demoted their single friends so that they didn't see them as often, they didn't talk to their parents as often. And now, of course, studies are always averages, so there are always exceptions. But typically, people who get married become more insular. And it's the single people who stay single who are not demoting their friends from, dinner to lunch or, weekends to weekdays or whatever.
This makes me reflect on from an evolutionary perspective, because I think some people's argument is that it's not natural, it's not normal.
Yes.
But in our hunter-gatherer days, there used to be people in the village who didn't have kids of their own so that they could support other families.
Yeah.
And that maybe that their role is to keep the community together,
Right.
To engage people in events,
Yes.
and to keep a sense of community and connection. I think of inclusive fitness in the same way, where we're not all driven to procreate or, to propagate our species
Right.
through our own genes.
Yes.
It can be through supporting other people that we actually have that need met.
There's a study of people who live alone, not all single people live alone, and they are more likely to be the life of their communities. They join more civic groups, they take more classes, they go out to dinner more. So they're really keeping the cities and towns alive, contrary to the stereotype that, we need married people to have a lively community or a lively civic life. And that's not true. And another thing, your parents might be bugging you to get married when you're young and maybe keep bothering you. But then when they get older, they're going to be relieved to have a grown child who's single. And there's research on too. Single kids, grown kids are much more likely to help their parents than their coupled siblings are.
And then I think, again, it's the reframe of thinking that, well, you didn't find someone, so now you're in the situation.
Right.
But instead, you found yourself.
Yes.
And this is why you're in this
Yes.
situation.
Yeah.
I sent you that Eartha Kitt clip.
Can anyone live with Eartha Kitt?
That's not for me to decide. That's for someone who decides to live with me to decide. Not for me.
But are you willing to compromise within a relationship?
To compromise? What is compromising? Compromising for what? Compromising for what reason? To compromise? For what? To compromise. What is compromise?
If a man came into your life, wouldn't you want to compromise?
Stupid.
Her attitude is wonderful. I love her. One thing I will say the single at heart are uncompromising about is being true to themselves. So they are not going to be in a romantic relationship because that's what people think they should do or that's what they're pressured to do.
So it's not even about finding somebody who can fully accept you.
Right.
Because to fully accept yourself is to know that I don't want to find someone.
Yes, yes. One of my favorite stories from the Single at Heart book is from a woman who did find someone she loved and who loved her, and they got engaged. And she found that once they were engaged, she wasn't at all happy about planning a wedding, and she started feeling down. And she realized this isn't what she wanted to do. And she told her fiancé, I want to travel the world. I want to do all these different things. And he said, well, we can do that. We can travel the world together. Even if we have kids, we can do that. And she realized she didn't want to do it with somebody else. These were her adventures that she wanted to have on her own.
What's the term for bachelors who are like forever bachelors? Anyone know? Is it like terminal bachelors? When you've got...
Yeah, I don't know.
There's like a term for like, it's escaping me right now, but for that particular,
Yeah.
it can be any gender,
Yeah.
but we'll say man because it's traditionally a man who
Yeah.
does this role, who he's just Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
He has these like partners, but they come and go. He's just mostly single, has never been married before. Would someone like that fall under single at heart?
If he loves his single life, so if he really appreciates the freedom, if he appreciates having time to himself, if he wants to organize his life in a way that does not involve putting a romantic partner at the center of it and leading a conventional romantic life. I mean, what's important about being single at heart is that you're not running away from something. It's not like, oh, I had romantic relationships and they were so awful, I never want to do that again.
Issues
Yeah, exactly. It's a positive thing. It's loving your freedom, your solitude, the opportunity to be there for the people who need you, maybe your parents, maybe someone else, to be there for your community, if that's what you like to do, and to have as many people in your life that you want to have and to pay attention to them and be there for them rather than just the one. So I like to say that married and couple people have the one, but single people have the ones.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. For people who are listening to this, whom feel like they self-sabotage relationships, they identify with being chronically single, but these are truths that they're frustrated about.
Right.
What checklist would you offer them to say, hey, maybe it's not that you're sabotaging good things, but you're actually trying to preserve the really good things?
Again, that's part of the toxic culture that leads single people to believe that if they don't want a romantic relationship, there's something wrong with them. Or if they can't stay in one, there's something wrong with them. I think a lot of people who are in romantic relationships over and over again and they don't last either think to themselves or are told by other people that they're sabotaging. And maybe some of them are. And they would be the people who really do want to be in a romantic relationship, but maybe they're scared or they really do have issues. But another category are the people who really would flourish by being single. And that the reason these relationships don't last is because they don't really want to be in a romantic relationship. I mean, one man who is single at heart in my Single at Heart book told me that he deliberately chose women who he thought wouldn't want to stay with him.
What are some of the things that you would have missed out on doing if you believe you were partnered?
You know, I would miss out on every single day waking up so happy. Knowing that my day was mine to live however I wanted. I would miss having a place of my own. I would miss having time to myself. I would miss getting to be with whoever I want, whenever I want. I would miss being able to change plans at the last minute or get up in the middle of the night because I thought of something and I want to write it down. I guess some people in couples can do that. And I would miss the big life-changing things I can do on my own. So for example, when I was 47, I moved from the East Coast. I was at the University of Virginia. I moved all the way out here to UC Santa Barbara, and it was actually supposed to be just a one-year sabbatical, but I loved it so much, I stayed. And I stayed not having a secure job. And I just loved it so much. I loved the sunshine, and I loved the people, and I loved the intellectual atmosphere in Santa Barbara and the progressive values. And, you know, if I were coupled, I'd have to wonder about, you know, does my partner really want to upend their whole life and move across this country? But for me, since I never wanted to be coupled, that wasn't even part of my mental arithmetic. I just thought, is this something I want to do?
We were chatting before and you told me that your schedule is that you go to bed at 4 a.m. and wake up at 11.
Yes.
That sounds like porn to me.
Oh,
Like that is actually like my chronological
yeah.
needs. It's so interesting because there's this new like online push towards the 5 a.m. club
Oh.
and the benefits of getting up at 5 a.m.
Oh, please.
Right?
That's when I'm going to sleep.
That's for the birds for me.
Yeah, really.
And now we're kind of forced into a sleep schedule that doesn't feel intuitive to me,
right.
or I think to my husband even.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
being able to honor yourself even on that basic level, that's
right.
very delicious.
When I was hired at the University of Virginia, I was hired at the same time with about 6 other people. And when they were negotiating their contract, they'd say, I want this equipment, I want this lab, I want this, that, and the other thing. And I said, I want classes that don't start until the afternoon. That was my non-negotiable.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
I'm like so on board. I'm on board with everything you said. Thank you so much. This is a lovely conversation.
Thank you. I really enjoyed
Where
talking
can
to you.
the people go to get all the Bella, all the Single at Heart, more information, whether they feel personally connected or just intrigued by the concept?
Right. Okay. So get my book, Single at Heart, for sure. Go to my website. It's belladepaulo.com. BELLADEPAULO. No dots or spaces or anything.com. And if you can't remember that, just Google Single at Heart and you'll find my book and my website. And on my website, there are links to my Psychology Today blog and lots of other articles I've written. And there's a Single at Heart in the media page, which will soon have this. Look there, and I think you'll find lots of things.
Thank you. We found a lot today. I appreciate your time.
Great. Thank you.
That's it. Okay, so we covered a lot in this conversation, and I can't wait to unpack all of this with my lovers community. And did you know you can be a part of that too? Head to loversbyshan.com/community to sign up.
All right, I'm actually really excited to talk about this topic with everyone because I had to check so many biases. Even when I titled the name for this event, I was like, people who are just gonna be single for the rest of their life. And then I was like, why did I use the word just? And I was like, Bella actually gave a title for this. It's called Single at Heart. That was what she labeled it as. And that's what we should be defining this as. I've also, as a caveat, been watching a lot of shows about animal families and animal tribes and communities. And almost every single animal family that I've watched has had single at heart members within the community, which from an evolutionary standpoint makes perfect sense. So it feels like a very natural thing to do, a very mammalian thing to do, and yet in our society, it's a very taboo and foreign thing to do. So I'm curious to hear all of your reactions.
I'm married and I will forever want to be with him. But like I've said in previous, posts, that I do agree that if it's not him, I will never do this again with anyone else. And I do look at my single people and I'm like, I'm missing out on what they have, of the ability to, anytime any friend is struggling, to, of course you can come stay in my house, but now I have to ask my husband. Of course I can go to help you with your 1-year-old. Of course I can do all these things that I want to do, but I'm always having to check with my husband. I do it, but I don't want to at all. I would prefer not to.
There seemed to be this association, if you're past 30 or if you're past 35 and you're not in a relationship or don't follow that relationship escalator, you're at home with your cats, which could be true, but also one of the people that I love so much is Tracee Ellis Ross, and she is single and she has so many beautiful relationships. She goes on trips, she does this, she does that, and I feel like we center so much in our society, so much value, especially on women, non-binary folks, femme presenting too, on do you have a partner or not, especially if the partner is a man.
What's interesting about Tracee Ellis Ross as an example is because she is not single at heart, she's still seeking at heart.
I'm only doing that based on the Michelle Obama podcast where she was like, I still want a partner. I'm still looking for it. And that's her truth, and I will honor that. I'm also curious if there are some people who are still seeking, who are actually single at heart, but because they're in a society that tells them that, like, no, you must want a partner, they're like, oh no, I don't have one yet, but I do still want it, without having the almost option of being like, yeah, maybe I actually am single at heart and I do enjoy romantic connections that are a bit less attached and more sporadic than something continuous and long term. So that's an interest. I hope she sees this episode, and I'd love to know what her reflection is on it.
It's really reminded me of this book called Ace by Angela Chen, about asexuality and about just decentralizing sex and romantic partnerships in general, and exploring all of what life has to offer in general. Outside of that you just put so much emphasis on romantic partnerships, and treat platonic and familial relationships like it's on the back burner, like it's a second thought. But those are literally the very relationships that you depend on the most before you get in a romantic partnership and afterwards. And I always thought that was ridiculous, man. I've always treated my romantic partners just as importantly as my friends and my family. And honestly, that's gotten me in trouble in a lot of my relationships. Gotten in all out fights between like a romantic partner, which would be a woman, and my homeboy, as if I had like two partners or something like this. This has been ridiculous.
This is something I kind of think about often. I remember a few years ago, I was talking to my sister-in-law and her mother, and I was saying how, yeah, I want to be married, but he would have to live like across the street or next door or something. I don't want him to live in my house. So then that makes me think, well, do I really want to be married, or do I just want a partnership in some form or fashion? But because I've been socialized to believe marriage is the only way to be partnered, I need to evaluate, well, what do I really want that to look like? Does it have to be marriage, or can it just be various lovers or partners for different events to be my plus one?
I just want to note, Shayla, how good your background is, because you're an OBGYN, extremely accomplished, very decorated. And I often say to people, like, do you know how hard it is to accomplish one dream come true? It takes so much effort and time. I'm in a stage now of really trying to like build friendships, and I'm realizing like that's a lot of work and effort and time. And so to say that like we have to look at people and say you have to have all of these things accomplished by age 30 or 40, where it's like, no, maybe you focus on one part of your life for a bit of time, and then you can switch focus to another. So it's kind of leaving space for the truth of the matter of like, you can spend a lot of time being highly decorated and really focus your energy on giving back to the world, giving to your purpose, building community, building friendships, and then decide later on that you want to focus on romantic love. But there was an interesting stat that Bella gave in the cheat sheet, which is within the community right now, which I offer, which for anybody who wants more information on Single at Heart. There was so many more great nuggets that, she shared, but we didn't get to talk about during the interview. But one of the nuggets that she shared is that people who are single at heart are happier than single people who are still seeking. And I think that kind of can come with the peace that you get to when you realize that you're not incomplete just because you don't have this thing in your life. But there, again, like I also leave space for the fact that you can still want to add more to the abundance that you already have. How can we as a community make more space for the single at heart? And for those people to still be lovers, because they are.
Inviting your single friends out. When you get together with people, why are you only inviting couples and like going to the cottage with only couples? Like, it's crazy how many like of my like old friend group is very like all coupled up, and I felt lonely even though I have my spouse, but we very much have our own lives and our lives together. And I felt lonely in that group. And so I found more friends that had the diversity, and, single people and coupled people, like, include them, because they definitely feel othered and not included. Or people that are coupled and then break up, all of a sudden you're not bringing them out anymore. That's crazy. So I think we just need to be aware of what we're doing. And I think sometimes we're not really intentionally trying to other them, but I think we need to be more aware of that.
I like to travel. It's one of my biggest pastimes. And sometimes I do travel solo. And when people come up to me and try to make conversations, always one of the first conversations they ask is, about my husband, or, do you have children? And when I say I have neither, like, I can see the switch turn off. And they're like, well, we don't know what to talk about with you because you don't have a husband and kids. But there is so much more about me that is interesting that we could talk about, but nobody even cares about that once they find out I don't have a husband and children. So I think acknowledging that romantic love and that path of life that's the only area in life where people are expected to follow the same path. Like if somebody says, I don't like tomatoes, and you like tomatoes, well, nobody bats an eye. You just don't like tomatoes. But if you say, I don't want a husband, then it's, what? How can you not want a husband? What's wrong with you? So I think acknowledging just there are different ways to exist in this world.
For everybody who is watching, within the lovers community, we're going to have more information from Bella around Single at Heart, but of course, you can go and get her book. So all the information's in the info box below, including information how to join the community if you're interested. All right, see you next week.